Soul has been acclaimed as one of Pixar's best movies, and perhaps one of the best movies of the new millennium up until that point in general. Now, knowing that it would be heavy on the existentialism, I went into it already accepting that it wouldn't be for kids, and it most certainly wasn't. But I have to admit, my feelings on it were decidedly mixed. And today, I'd like to go over some of the things that I did and didn't like about this movie, and what I believe it did right and wrong. And just to clarify, this will be one of my more opinion-based videos. So if you're looking for a more objective analysis of this movie, then this probably isn't the video for you. And needless to say, there will be spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, but plan to, then you should probably come back to this video another day. You have been warned. Okay, so to start off simply, I did like this movie. I just have a few issues with it. And one of the biggest is that I feel it glosses over something very important to 22's character, which is that she has no interest in living because she only sees the negative side to everything in life and doesn't get what the big deal in living is all about. But after experiencing life firsthand and getting to enjoy its simple pleasures, she finally gets it and now wants to live. But the thing is, just because she sees that there is a good side to life, doesn't mean she was wrong about everything she had noted about living before. And listen, I consider myself an optimist by nature. But at the same time, I just feel that the movie completely ignores everything 22 says about the world in order to drive home its message about enjoying life, never once acknowledging that everything she says is completely true. The world is a pretty messed up place full of disappointment, hypocrisy, and misery. And yet, once 22 enters the real world, all of that is suddenly forgotten. I mean, what if the family she's born into is an abusive one? What if she has terrible parents and a horrible childhood? Or dies at an early age due to a freak accident or illness? I mean, given the kind of movie this is, I know that would never actually happen. But as 22 rightfully points out, these things do happen in the real world. And the movie never offers any resolution or middle ground to that problem, and instead just tells people to enjoy the world regardless of your problems. Which isn't a bad message, don't get me wrong, but I just think a better way to have handled that was for somebody, be it Joe, the Jerrys, or 22 herself, to acknowledge that yes, the world is still full of bad things, but it's worth experiencing them because life is worth living and experiencing that much. And if anything, that might have helped the anti-suicide message a lot of people believe this movie to have even more. Because at least that way it offers hope and comfort to people whose lots in life aren't exactly the best, instead of just ignoring that aspect altogether to show how great living can be. And again, this wouldn't be so much of an issue if what 22 was saying about life was completely wrong or irrational. It's just the fact that everything she says is 100% true, and that the movie offers no acknowledgement or resolution for it after the fact that I believe is the problem. Because being optimistic or hopeful doesn't mean ignoring the bad stuff. It's about seeking a solution to it or trying to find a way to at least make it better. And maybe one could argue that the movie does still do that, but I still think it would have been better if 22's complaints about the world were addressed out loud at some point, if only to drive that point home. But on a slightly different topic, Another issue I have with the movie is the whole concept behind the great before. Now, sure, the idea of a place where souls get their personalities in and of itself isn't a bad one, and is actually a pretty clever idea. But the one problem I have with it, and this might come across as a bit nitpicky, so forgive me if it feels that way, is how the souls behave. I mean, some of them act almost like mindless babies, but others can speak English very well, seem to comprehend what's going on around them, and have a level of self awareness. And then there's somebody like 22 who's so knowledgeable that she could probably make a college professor proud, and she isn't even born yet. The way I see it, what's the point of souls being so smart and self aware if they're just going to lose it all when they're born anyway? 22 won't remember anything of her millenniums in the great before, and all the knowledge she acquired in that time will be completely lost to her. In other words, I feel like the idea of a preborn soul acting with any intelligence or self awareness doesn't make sense because babies and small children need to be taught everything and never show any indication of having learned anything before birth. So the whole concept behind 22 is, at least to me, a pretty flawed one. Now, once again, you can say I'm overthinking that if you want to, but that's still something I believe doesn't make total sense when you stop and think about it. Then again, I actually like the idea of the great before on the whole. In fact, I wish the whole movie had taken place there like they originally planned on having it. Because, at least to me, once they ended up in that whole body swap thing, I kind of lost interest in the movie for a while. And before you all start running to the comments to say it, yes, I do get that 22 living in Joe's body for a while was the whole point of the movie, for her to finally be able to appreciate life. But I'm the type who's more interested in more out there concepts when it comes to fantasy. Maybe it's because I'm a writer myself, but the more science fiction and fantasy deviates from reality, the more interested I am in it. And The Great Before was exactly that kind of place. So I was a bit disappointed when they left it after such a short length of time. And also, as many have pointed out, wouldn't you think the count would be off a lot more often? That instead of being like, the count is off, but that hasn't happened in centuries, that they'd be more like, the count's off again? That's the third time this week. Because I am pretty sure that people on an almost regular basis would be freaking out about being dead over things a lot more important than finally getting to play piano in a nightclub. And for one final thing, there's the one Jerry's claim that the idea of a purpose is so basic. Right. Because just enjoying life is a more abstract and complicated concept than the idea that people are put on Earth for a reason and that they have a purpose to fulfill. Now, once again, I get it. The moral behind this movie is to enjoy life and not get so caught up and obsessed with one particular thing. But I just felt that specific line came across as really pretentious and borders on making no sense whatsoever. But as I said before, those were just some of the problems I had with the movie, and that doesn't mean that there wasn't plenty I did like about it. For instance, Terry was a blast, and frankly, I wish it had gotten more screen time. They even could have made for the perfect villain in a more traditional kind of movie. And Moonwind was also pretty fun as well. It's a shame he didn't get more focus either. And I will admit, Towards the end, this movie really nailed the existentialism. When Joe was playing the piano and reflecting over everything he's learned from his experience with 22, you can just feel the questions, concepts, and soul searching that every good movie on those topics has. Again, it might not have executed everything surrounding it perfectly, but that scene was frankly an absolute masterpiece in existentialism. And Joe's just general problems in his everyday life and striving to achieve a higher goal was also pretty well done. And on that note, I feel another thing this movie got right was the ending. Because I know there are some who felt that it would have been better with it ending with Joe dying, but I have to agree with the writers on this one. What's the point of having a whole movie dedicated to Joe learning how to truly appreciate life if he doesn't get to apply those lessons after the fact? Frankly, to have him die at the end might have just gone completely against everything the movie was trying to say, at least in my opinion. Joe was walking through life blind, and now that he can truly see, he can live a better life because of it. If he had died at the end, then that would have made everything he had learned completely pointless. So, to put it simply, yes, I believe they made the right move there. Besides, I think him dying would have been a pretty heavy ending to a movie that's trying to convince people that life is worth living just for living's sake. His willingness to die is more than enough, I feel. Alright, so to start to wrap this up, I don't think Soul is a perfect movie, but that it ultimately does get its intended message across. It does have some flaws, yes, but I don't think they're enough to ruin the movie. And listen, if you think I'm dead wrong about everything I've said in this video, that's perfectly okay. This is just how I personally felt about the movie. And if you think I couldn't be any less right, I have no issue with that. But either way, as I just said, I still believe that it was a pretty good movie, and that it was still one of Pixar's better movies of its time, if not one that was made for kids. But don't even get me started on that whole thing again. Okay, that's all I have to say on that. So now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that Soul has some pretty major flaws but is still ultimately a good movie? Or do you believe that it's an absolute masterpiece and that I don't know what I'm talking about? Please feel free to tell me in the comments below. And once again, you don't have to agree with me on this video. You can feel any way about the movie that you want to. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.